nice to have you aboard. It's been
Happy
really
to be
great
here.
working with you. Thanks for agreeing to do this interview. I just wanted to ask you a couple questions and kind of see how you're doing um, with all of this new adventure stuff that we've been going on. It's definitely been a ride.
Mhm.
So the first question I have for you is basically, who are you and how do you define your passion? What is your passion?
Well, I am Carolyn Hitt. I'm an artist. I'm a sort of multidisciplinary artist in that, like, I paint, I build, I do sculpture, I do ceramics, and then I also curate. I'm the founder of Blue Cone Studios and the co-founder of Forever Safe Spaces, which are sort of my community activation organizations. And
Can you tell us a little bit about each one of them?
Sure. So Blue Cone is the studio space that I've had on 11th Avenue for the past 6 years. And I have operated it as a very low to zero cost studio where artists have had residencies. I've had a number of resident artists over the years. We have a kiln, we have woodworking supplies, and instead of breaking things down into like private little studios, I've kept it a very open format so that the main room has always been sort of a communal room of supplies and things. And pre-COVID, I used to host a Tuesday night gathering called Tuesday Night Tea, which is where a lot of young emerging artists and people that were sort of searching for community and just maybe didn't have supplies or didn't have, like just wanted to be around and make some art. I did that. It was a free thing. We put some food out and we'd hang out every Tuesday. So that was a long-standing sort of community project of mine. And also within Blue Cone, we've produced The Relevant Unknowns, which is a yearbook style sort of directory of artists and people who are engaging in our creative community. So that's Blue Cone. And then sort of out of Blue Cone, and as a direct result of COVID, the impact of COVID on artists, and also the uprisings and the impact of the social justice movements on artists, we created Forever Safe Spaces. And that really is centered around, it's a social purpose corporation. So it's an opportunity for community to actually invest in the company as we build and maintain community spaces. We do a lot of network weaving. Really the number one thing that it came out of is the idea of how sort of debilitating it is to try to progress a career in art while also trying to pay these exorbitant rent and utilities. And how, especially during COVID, where a lot of artists lost their second jobs or what have you, and the avenue for them to promote and get their art out there, all of the galleries and the event spaces shutting down was really difficult and really had a deep impact on the artists in our community, and especially those that, Julie and I have both been pretty active in nurturing over the past number of years. She goes a long way back, but anyway, so that's Forever Safe Spaces, and we're building a crowdsourcing platform and social network in order to sort of align artists with those that have resources and the ability to help us get from surviving to thriving. So that's really, it's sort of a many baskets, many tactics approach to the all around holistic care it takes to nurture a community of artists.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's so cool.
Which is sort of how it leads into, you know, to what we're doing here, because I think it's all really aligned in that way.
Right, right. Thank you for taking a minute to explain those two programs, projects of yours, because I think they're both they're very important, and it's really beautiful to like hear you talk about them, especially because I personally didn't know all of those things about both of those things. I knew bits and pieces. So thank you so much for delving in.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's a lot. So people can sometimes have a difficult time grasping the entire scope of the projects that we're working on. So
right.
Pretty big.
Well, and I think it's really important that people hear about the projects, because I think sometimes there's so much going on, or there's nothing going on, and folks don't know either, right? They can't see what's happening in front of them. And with that said, I'm really curious why you're interested in tiny houses. Like, what is your interest in tiny houses in general?
Well, so besides the economic value of a tiny house and the fact that, especially in the city, you know, there's not a lot of open properties, and also there are a lot of sort of I don't know, misused properties, or properties with just an excess of like empty land, or empty, you know, empty spaces, and tiny houses are I think a delightful solution to the apartment building, to like, you know, that sort of I don't know. I personally have been sort of dreaming of sort of tiny house villages for a while now, and that in the sense of the intentional communities that are possible around tiny houses. I personally don't think that we need as much space as we take, you know, and we are increasingly growing more limited in space. So, but the opportunity to have a thing, you know, a legacy, and build something on that is your own, is pretty rare in our community. So the more some of these properties can be transformed into sort of communal, intentional little tiny house communities, like I think that that's a great solution to some of the disparity that's going on, and can provide a lot more, I don't know. I mean, everybody, you know, it's kind of a tiny house trend been going on for a little bit. And I think that really speaks to, you know, people's concern about space and how we value it.
Yeah, it definitely brings up lots of different angles to tackle and to talk about, right?
Right.
And definitely conversations that we're not necessarily having as a country, right? On the mainstream. Yeah.
Right. For sure. For sure.
Well, my last question is basically, why BIPOC Stack? Why are you interested in this project? Like,
well, you know,
why'd you come on board?
Well, I think that in the sense that all when we're really looking at the housing instability amongst artists, and the sort of like disparity, especially with those that have multiple levels of marginalization, you know, and the fact that the hope to even ever own a property is so slim, right? Because you're already trying to imagine just getting level, let alone buying something, let alone owning something. If it doesn't run legacy in your family, the likelihood of us creating it grows rarer. You know what I mean? So I like the model that you've created. Like I said, I think that the idea of intentional community is important when it comes to housing, and especially housing artists. I mean, I know that there are people all across the board that need housing and want to build legacy and want to have the opportunity. My particular focus is artists, especially young emerging artists, and having that opportunity to, because we as artists are are generally like sole proprietors of our own businesses, right? Which makes it even more difficult to say buy a home, because we don't have that, especially those that are, you know, trying to make a living on this, or just doing a little secondhand job to support their art career. It takes so much recognition in the state of mortgage brokers and all of those things, in order to even qualify for any kind of, I would like to buy my own home. I can't, you know, but I can't prove the tens and thousands of dollars worth of value I have, according to the system as it's currently laid out, right? So the opportunity for artists to sort of like move around that and have an opportunity to buy something that they can not only own, but then possibly use as, you know, equity, and then possibly, you know, then they could sell it. If these are ways that we have an opportunity at ownership, and that's really important to me. And the other thing is like the idea of having sort of a community house. I mean, this is something that I had been also thinking of, so it just seemed so naturally aligned in that, the idea of having a community house and multiple houses around where resources are shared around gardening, around, you know, like gas, electric, those sorts of things. Those necessities can be shared without feeling like you're only in like an apartment building. You know, you feel like it's something that's yours. But I also think that one of the biggest problems when we're dealing with how the city manages housing, right, is that a lot of times people do get into housing, but then there's not necessarily the community, because housing isn't the only thing necessary here. Actually, if you want people to thrive, they need a community based on healing, you know, connection, conversation, people that they can, you know, like build relationship with. And a lot of times, you know, like people will just be thrown into housing without any other resources to help. And it's not just, you know, we can't just throw the band-aids on. We have to heal where we are at a deficit in our culture. And that, I think, is centered around community living, small community safety. Do you know what I mean? And looking out for each other. And when you have, you know, a communal place and a number of artists that may not necessarily have their own community outside that, it gives an opportunity to build, it gives an opportunity to network, and then it gives that whole entire unit a confidence because of that sort of like foundation of care. So that's really where my interest lies in all of this.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. That's where my interest lies as well.
You know?
Yeah, it takes a village. It definitely does. And our villages are falling apart. So.
They are. They're really, you know, like mental health and capacity and those sorts of things are really, really at a struggle point right now, you know. Even with those of us that have, you know, I feel like I have a strong community of, you know, even our small circle, like it's strong, but everybody is still struggling with that real life shit, right? And so these possibilities, all possibilities of getting folks into more stable housing, because that's like literally the number one thing to build on, because you just can't, it's so difficult to advance your craft or even participate in your craft if you're constantly stressed out about living, like just surviving and existing. Like it makes it like, you know, it makes it hard to create. So
yeah, and it's like that thing around like the starving artist, right? It's not that, I don't necessarily believe that artists need to starve. I think that our system just doesn't support it
yeah,
for artists to not starve.
it's a part of the narrative.
It's a part of the narrative.
In that, like, oh, well, you should expect to starve before you make it. You should expect to have to suffer through torture jobs of misery. And if you don't, then you must be spoiled in it. Like, we don't value you until your product is valid, until we decide your product, the product of what you know, you put, we don't value you until other people tell us to value your product. Right.
Yeah.
And that's fortunate, because that's, we don't, like, the ability to grow and really progress just isn't supported. The process isn't supported.
Right.
And if they want, you know, and with how bad COVID really sort of like knocked everything sideways, like the recovery of our cultural workers and our creative like engagement platforms like really needs some strong support if you want these young people to continue to like, you know, be the artists that really make up who we are as a city, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
As whatever, like we gotta, otherwise we're gonna lose them.
Yeah. Well, and it's already started. That's already
Yeah.
started. Yeah. And this idea that, you know, packing people into apartment buildings is the solution. A lot of folks that I talk to that actually live in apartment buildings are like, they feel isolated. They feel
Yeah.
cut off. They don't feel like they're a part of anything, you know, and they're
No.
not really sure where to go to find to be a part of anything.
That's
You know,
exactly
so we're not even having that conversation, right? We're just building more and more and more, and it's not working for
it's
everybody.
not working because you don't have that sort of communal gardening. Do you know what I mean? Oh, here's how we take care of this. Oh, the kitchen is here, so we all run into each other at some point. You know,
Right.
it's and maybe that's you know, I'd have laughed years ago to think of talking about communes in that sense, because I guess that is what essentially we're talking about here. But it's so easy to, like, I've lived in my apartment building for 11 years, right? I know zero of my neighbors.
Wow.
And there are people in the building that I know, and we don't hang out. You know what I mean? Like, it's not about that. But I think when you bring people together that are already alike, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know that the people around you are artists. You know that they're coming from the same communities that you're coming from. You know that the expectation is sort of like engagement and acceptance and and allyship and sort of like, what's the word, amplification of each other. When you know that that's what you're all coming in there for, it's easier to start up those conversations. It's easier to build those relationships around common interests, right? And so many artists that we know have multiple interests. So I may be a painter, you know, like, but I also build stuff. We may know, you know, people that like play music, but they are also farmers. Like, it's so rare that artists only have one thing that they do, right? We all have multiple interests around things that make life beautiful and whole. And I think that, you know, bringing people, the more like-minded people we bring together, the stronger we can amplify the energy of each core group, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the questions I have for you, unless there's something that you would like to add in.
No, I think I
addition.
probably said a lot and said it all. I mean, this is pretty much like been my driving. When you say what my passion is, like, it's all of this, right? And then you add on top of it the storytelling and the ability to document and really carry these legacies forward, as far as like the builders and those that are laying these foundations, like and the young people that are creating now, and the possibility of watching them and supporting their careers throughout their lives, and really making that commitment to the people that we're working with. Like, that's where my whole passion is. Like, that's what the driving force in my, you know, being is. So I'm happy to be here.
I love it. We're happy to have you. I'm so grateful. Yeah. Well,
Okay,
that's all I got.
Perfect. Can